Arden Core stood at the edge of the violet mist, staring at the jagged cliffs of Virelia. The planet was alive in ways most humans could never understand. Gravity twisted at odd angles, glowing vines hummed with strange energy, and the air carried a faint electric charge that made his skin tingle. Every sound felt amplified, every shadow suspicious. He tightened his grip on his plasma blade, the only weapon that could cut through the living crystal that the Huntresses favored as both armor and weapon. He had been warned. No human had ever survived more than a few hours in this forest. The Very were apex predators, fast, clever, and telepathic. They hunted in packs, communicating without sound, striking without warning. Yet Arden's mission left him no choice. The Luminar seed lay at the heart of their territory, a glowing plant that could terraform dying worlds. If he failed, billions of lives in the human colonies would end. Arden's stomach twisted at the thought, but he forced himself to take the first step into the forest. The mist wrapped around him like a living thing, brushing against his arms and legs, hiding the jagged ground beneath. His eyes darted constantly, scanning for movement. A sudden rustle made him freeze. The forest had eyes, he knew. Crystalline leaves shimmered unnaturally, and he sensed the faint pulse of telepathic presence. One of the Huntresses was close. He ducked behind a massive tree, listening. The Very debated silently, their thoughts like sharp knives. Who would strike first? Who would get the human? Arden's heart pounded, but his mind worked faster. He had studied these predators, memorized their patterns. They were deadly, yes, but not omniscient. Humans survived by thinking, by bending the world to their advantage. He scanned the area and noticed the crystal roots forming a narrow path above a ravine. It was risky, but it might let him move undetected. He inhaled slowly, forcing his fear down. One step at a time. As he moved, he kept low, careful not to touch the glowing vines, which reacted to motion with bursts of light. A misstep could give away his presence. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly, but Arden noticed subtle signs. Broken branches, faint impressions in the soil, a faint shimmer in the air where the Huntresses had passed. Each clue told him something, where they had been, where they might be going next. Then he heard a sharp, mental screech. Scylla, one of the Huntresses, had detected him. Arden's stomach dropped. She was fast, faster than any human, and her claws could cut through steel. He sprinted toward the ravine, leaping across hanging crystal vines. The bridge swayed violently and he felt it bend under his weight, but he calculated the rhythm perfectly. A misstep would send him plummeting into the jagged rocks below. He landed hard on the other side, breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest seemed alive around him, shadows moving unnaturally. He caught a glimpse of Scylla above, crouched, her eyes like molten silver, studying him. Arden's pulse raced, but he forced himself to think. He had one advantage, human creativity. While the Very were strong and fast, they followed instincts. He used the environment, causing a crystal lattice overhead to collapse. It pinned Scylla momentarily, giving him a small window to escape deeper into the forest. Even so, Arden knew this was only the beginning. The Very hunted in packs, and every sound he made now could signal the rest. He stumbled into a narrow crevice between two cliffs, pressing himself against the cool stone. Sweat dripped down his face. Fear clawed at him, but Arden forced calm. He had survived so far not because of strength but because he had thought 3 steps ahead. The forest was dangerous, but every danger had a solution. He just had to find it before they did. As he crouched in the shadows, he studied his surroundings. Strange plants pulsed with faint light, and he realized some could be used to his advantage. The Luminar seed's energy resonated faintly even here. If he could reach it, the risk would be worth it. Arden's fingers brushed the walls of the crevice, feeling tiny vibrations, noticing cracks and ledges that could hold his weight. Every detail counted. One wrong move could end everything. Then he sensed it, not just one but multiple presences approaching. The Huntresses had realized he was not prey to be ignored. Their thoughts moved like a storm in his mind, and Arden's chest tightened. He had to act fast. Using a small mirror from his pack, he reflected faint light to create multiple shadows along the cliff walls. The illusion worked. One of the Huntresses faltered, confused, buying him precious seconds. Arden didn't hesitate. He scrambled upward, moving toward a higher ledge where the trees grew denser and the mist thicker. His muscles burned, his lungs screamed, but Arden's mind was sharper than ever. Every choice, every move mattered. This was survival, yes, but more than that, it was courage, the determination to keep going when every instinct screamed to turn back. And he could not fail. Not here. Not now. As he reached the ledge, Arden paused, catching his breath. He looked ahead and saw the forest stretching endlessly, twisting into shadows and light. Somewhere deep inside, the Luminar seed waited. Somewhere deep inside, the Huntresses would regroup. Arden's fingers tightened on his plasma blade. This was only the first step. And he knew the real test, the one that would decide life or death, was just ahead. He took a deep breath, stepped forward, and vanished into the violet mist, leaving only a faint ripple of light where he had passed. The Huntresses would find him. Arden had no illusions. But he also had something they did not: the mind, courage, and ingenuity of a human being willing to face impossible odds. Arden pressed forward through the violet mist, heart pounding. Every rustle, every shadow could be a huntress closing in. The air smelled sharp, like ozone after lightning, and the faint hum of the jungle vibrated under his boots. He knew Silas' trap hadn't slowed the others for long. The pack would regroup quickly. He needed to keep moving, but he also needed a plan. Running blindly would get him killed. He spotted a narrow canyon ahead. Its walls were jagged and covered with reflective crystal moss. He knew he could use it to his advantage. The Very relied on sight and psychic cues. Both could be disrupted with a clever trick. Arden pulled a small mirror from his pack and angled it to bounce the faint light of the phosphorescent vines. Multiple shadows danced across the canyon walls. He held his breath, listening. A soft, guttural mental screech echoed in his mind. One huntress had fallen for the illusion. He didn't wait to see more. Sprinting across the canyon floor, he dodged low-hanging crystal spikes and leapt over gaps in the rock. The jungle seemed alive, every step threatening to betray him. A sudden vibration ran through the ground. Arden froze. The rest of the pack was near. He could feel their presence like a swarm of knives in his mind. Panic tried to grip him, but he shoved it aside. Fear was a tool, not a chain. Suddenly, a crystal branch snapped under his foot. The sound echoed. A huntress lunged from the mist above, claws gleaming like molten glass. Arden rolled to the side, feeling the wind of her strike brush his shoulder. Pain flared, but he forced himself upright. He could not stop now. Using his momentum, he vaulted onto a higher ledge and landed in a crouch. His eyes scanned for a hiding spot. He spotted a hollow in the cliff wall, partially hidden by glowing vines. He slipped inside, heart racing. Inside, the hollow was cramped, but it gave him a moment to breathe. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but Arden's mind raced faster than ever. He couldn't stay here long. The Very would soon sense him again. He pulled a small device from his belt, a pulsimeter meant to interfere with telepathic signals. It wasn't perfect, but it could scramble the Huntress's link for a few crucial seconds. He activated it. A low hum filled the hollow, and he felt a shift in the psychic waves around him. The pack faltered. Arden didn't waste a second. He crawled to the edge of the hollow and peered out. The canyon stretched ahead, twisting into narrow passageways and floating crystal bridges. One wrong move and he could fall into the ravine below. But he had learned early that Virilia rewarded ingenuity. The right use of the environment could turn death into survival. He spotted a cluster of hanging vines above, strong enough to hold his weight. Timing would be everything. He jumped, grabbing the vines. The jungle swayed violently, and shards of crystal brushed past him like blades. A huntress leapt after him, faster than he expected. Arden swung, using the momentum to kick a jagged crystal into her path. She hissed, twisting in midair, and crashed into a lower branch. He dropped onto a narrow ledge and ran, the pulsimeter still humming faintly. The pack was confused but not gone. Every second counted. As he rounded a sharp cliff face, Arden noticed a faint glow through the mist. Luminar spores, harmless unless disturbed, but they pulsed with energy. An idea formed. If he could use the spores to distract the Huntresses, he might buy himself more time. He tossed a small rock into the glowing cluster. The spores erupted into brilliant pulses, tiny lights flashing in hypnotic patterns. The Very screeched, psychic feedback surging through their minds. One faltered, stumbling into another. Arden didn't wait. He sprinted past, leaping across floating crystal vines to higher ground. The forest grew darker, thicker. Mist coiled around his legs and slowed his movements. His muscles burned, but Arden forced himself forward. Every choice had consequences. One mistake could end everything. He paused briefly, scanning the cliffs ahead. A large crystal tree stretched across a gap, its trunk wide enough to run along. Below, the ravine yawned like a mouth ready to swallow him. Arden calculated the distance, measured his step, and ran. He leapt, landing with barely a sound on the tree trunk. But the sense of danger never left him. A low hum of energy vibrated beneath his feet. The Very were adapting. Their psychic link had recovered. He could feel them coordinating, moving as one, aware of his every decision. Arden's pulse spiked. The forest itself seemed to watch him, alive, testing him. He adjusted his grip on the plasma blade and continued, knowing that the deeper he went, the closer he came to the heart of the Huntresses' territory, and to the Luminar seed. Then a new sound reached him, a faint, rhythmic clicking from above. Not the Huntresses. Something else. Something alive. Arden froze. The jungle was full of predators, yes, but this was different. A creature, enormous, moving silently through the mist. He could feel its intelligence, its awareness. His mind raced. Every instinct screamed to hide, but Arden's courage held firm. He had faced impossible odds before, and he would do it again. He pressed forward, inching along the tree trunk, heart hammering, knowing that every second could bring death or discovery. Somewhere ahead, the Luminar seed pulsed faintly, a beacon in the dark. And somewhere in the shadows, the Huntresses waited, relentless, patient, intelligent. Arden gritted his teeth. He was alone, yes, but he was human. And humans, he knew, never gave up. As he moved toward the glowing light, the rhythmic clicking grew louder. Arden's pulse quickened. Whatever was out there, it was coming closer. And Arden realized, with a jolt, that survival would not be enough. He would have to fight, outsmart, and dare the impossible, because if he failed, the consequences would reach far beyond his own life. Arden paused for a fraction of a second, listening. The rhythmic clicking had grown louder, echoing through the mist. It wasn't one creature, it was several, moving with intelligence, coordinated like a pack, but heavier, more deliberate than the very Huntresses. His pulse quickened, but Arden forced himself to breathe evenly. Fear was natural, but panic was death. He had survived so far because he thought faster than the predators. Now he needed a plan. He scanned the cliffs around him. The forest here was denser, the vines thicker, and crystals jutted from the ground like jagged teeth. His mind worked quickly, calculating every movement. The pack would follow his scent, psychic traces, and any noise he made. Arden's advantage was human ingenuity, the ability to improvise, to see patterns the Very couldn't. He spotted a shallow crevice beside a crystal outcrop, partially hidden by glowing moss. If he could lure the creatures there, the narrow space would limit their advantage, making them vulnerable to a trap. Arden crouched, listening, letting the mist mask his presence. Footsteps approached, soft, precise, unyielding. The Huntresses had returned, and the heavier creatures followed, their eyes gleaming with intelligence. Arden's stomach tightened. They were closing in faster than he expected. He pulled a small device from his belt, a resonance emitter designed to mimic very psychic signals. It wasn't perfect, but it could confuse them for a few crucial seconds. He activated it. A low hum filled the air, vibrating the crystals nearby. The creatures froze for a moment, tilting their heads as if trying to decipher the false signal. Arden's pulse raced. This was his window. He darted from his hiding spot, rolling along the ground, and triggered a cluster of luminar spores with a rock. They erupted in a dazzling flash of pulsing light. The creatures flinched, psychic feedback distorting their coordination. Arden ran along a narrow ledge above, feeling the mist curl around him like fingers. Every step was measured, precise. One mistake and the fall would be fatal. Scylla appeared first, leaping from the mist. Her claws gleamed, aimed for his back. Arden ducked and rolled, then swung his plasma blade into a crystal hanging overhead. The lattice shattered, crashing onto Scylla. She screeched, pinned temporarily. He didn't wait. The other Huntresses followed, but the combination of light and psychic interference had slowed them. Arden leapt across a floating vine bridge, the wind from the fall of crystals brushing against him, almost knocking him off balance. He landed on a higher cliff, chest heaving. The forest seemed alive around him, watching, testing. Arden's mind raced. The pack was intelligent, but they relied on instinct and coordination. If he could separate them, even briefly, he could create an opening to reach the Luminar seed. He studied the terrain and noticed a natural funnel in the cliffs, narrow and winding. Perfect for a trap. Using fragments of crystal and fallen vines, Arden set up trip wires and balance triggers. He rigged the area so that if the Huntresses advanced, the crystals would collapse in a controlled cascade, blocking their path and creating a moment of chaos. It was risky, he would have to time his movement perfectly, but the alternative was certain death. Arden pressed forward, forcing himself to focus, every nerve taut with awareness. The creatures advanced. Their psychic presence filled the air, a mental pressure that made Arden's head throb. He felt the intelligence behind their coordination, the queen would be here soon. He gritted his teeth, feeling both fear and determination. Humans weren't the fastest or the strongest, but they adapted, improvised, and persisted. Arden would not fail. Not here, not now. He sprinted toward the funnel, baiting the Huntresses. They took the bait. One after another they followed, confident, coordinated. Arden leapt to a side ledge, pulling a small wire as he passed. The crystal lattice above them shuddered, then collapsed, creating a dazzling, violent barrier. Light reflected off the falling crystals, blinding the creatures for a split second. The pack stumbled, disoriented. Arden didn't hesitate. He dropped into the funnel below, rolling to absorb the impact. The vibrations of the collapsing crystals reverberated through the ground, masking his own movements. The creatures recovered quickly, but Arden had gained a crucial lead. He sprinted through twisting cliffs and tangled vines, leaping gaps with precise timing. Every second counted. Every misstep could end him. Then he saw it, a faint glow ahead. The luminar seed. It pulsed with soft, ethereal light, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Arden's chest tightened with emotion. Humanity depended on him. He forced himself to focus, ignoring exhaustion, ignoring fear. One misstep and the mission, and countless lives, would be lost. But he wasn't safe yet. From the mist above, the very queen appeared, her translucent wings glinting, her eyes molten silver. She moved deliberately, studying him, aware of every action. Arden's mind raced. Direct confrontation would be suicide. He had to rely on ingenuity, human cunning, and courage. Every instinct, every calculation had led him to this moment. He adjusted the resonance emitter, timing it to create a momentary illusion of multiple images. The queen hesitated, confused by the flickering images. Arden seized the moment, sprinting the final few meters toward the glowing seed. His legs burned, lungs screamed, but determination surged stronger than fatigue. Humans survived because they refused to give up. Because they dared to act when everything seemed impossible. As he reached the edge of the clearing, his hand brushed the seed's glowing surface. A sharp screech cut through the air. Scylla had recovered, and the queen was advancing fast. Arden's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. The funnel he had used to trap the pack could buy him a few seconds, but he needed more. A sudden thought struck him. He had one chance to turn the terrain itself into an ally. Arden scanned the cliffs, vines, and crystals. Every element could be used, timed, triggered, manipulated. If he could create a controlled collapse, he might just make it out alive. He gritted his teeth, fingers brushing the luminar seed. Every beat of his heart screamed danger. The queen's presence pressed down on him like a weight, psychic and physical. Arden's pulse raced. This was it. No room for error. Every human instinct, every ounce of courage, every lesson learned from survival, all would be tested in the next instant. And then, with the pack closing in, Arden took a deep breath and began to move, knowing the impossible challenge, the one that could decide everything, was only seconds away. Arden's chest heaved as he crouched behind the glowing luminar seed. Mist swirled around him, thick and electric, carrying the distant hum of the forest. The Huntresses had recovered. He could feel them in his mind, coordinated, calculating, closing the distance. And the queen, their leader, hovered just beyond the clearing, massive wings reflecting faint violet light, eyes like molten silver, watching him as if weighing the value of his life. Arden swallowed hard, pain and fear twisting in his stomach, but he forced himself to focus. Hesitation now meant death. He had one advantage, the environment itself. Every crystal, every vine, every patch of glowing moss could be used to confuse, slow, or trap the predators. Arden's mind raced, connecting the pieces. The funnel trap had slowed the pack, but it wasn't enough to stop the queen. He needed a distraction, something the Very had never seen, human ingenuity under pressure. Arden pulled the resonance emitter from his belt and adjusted the settings. He needed the queen to see multiple images of him, to hesitate long enough for him to act. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with grime and the faint mist in the air. He activated the device. A low hum filled the clearing, vibrating the crystals beneath him. The queen tilted her head, confused. The other Huntresses faltered, unsure which Arden to pursue. Timing was everything. Arden clenched his teeth and bolted toward the nearest ledge. As he ran, he triggered the trip wires he had set earlier. Crystals fell from above, creating a wall of light and noise, blinding and disorienting the Huntresses. Sparks of reflected light flashed across the mist, momentarily hiding him from sight. Arden leapt across the floating vines, twisting midair to land on a narrow cliff ledge. Below, the jagged canyon waited like a trap, but Arden's mind was sharp. He calculated every landing, every step, knowing one misstep could be fatal. The Queen's screech pierced the mist. She lunged forward, wings propelling her at impossible speed. Arden ducked under a low-hanging crystal, feeling the force of her strike pass over him. His muscles burned, but he pressed on. Ahead, the luminar seed glowed brighter, its energy pulsing as if responding to his determination. Arden's fingers itched to grab it, but he knew he had to survive first. One wrong move and the seed, and humanity's hope, would be lost. He reached a narrow outcrop and quickly fashioned a crude pulley from vines and crystal shards. If timed correctly, it could create a falling barrier of rocks and crystal to block the Queen's path. Arden secured the mechanism and paused, breath ragged, pulse hammering. The Queen hovered closer, sensing the seed's presence, her psychic pressure crushing against his mind. Arden's hands shook, but he forced calm. Humans survived because they adapted, because they dared to act when instinct screamed to flee. With precise timing, he triggered the pulley. Rocks and crystal tumbled down the cliffside in a controlled cascade. The Queen screeched in frustration, momentarily blocked by the debris. Arden seized the moment. He dashed forward, vaulting over the last gap between cliffs, and landed in front of the luminar seed. Its light bathed him, giving him a strange clarity, a surge of courage. He touched the seed, feeling its energy pulse through his fingers. But the Queen was not defeated. She struck from above, wings slicing through the mist. Arden rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding her claws. The other Huntresses advanced, eyes locked on him. He could feel their frustration, their disbelief. One human, alone, had survived traps, illusions and psychic confusion. Arden's mind worked faster than ever. He grabbed a nearby shard of reflective crystal and angled it toward the Queen, bouncing sunlight and glowing spores directly into her eyes. She faltered, blinded temporarily, giving him a few crucial seconds. Arden did not waste a moment. He adjusted the resonance emitter, creating an amplified illusion, dozens of copies of himself darting through the mist. The Queen hesitated, struggling to discern reality from illusion. The other Huntresses, disoriented by the flash of light and the psychic distortion, stumbled over vines and jagged rocks. Arden sprinted past them, dragging the luminar seed carefully in a protective field he had engineered from a temporary energy shield. He didn't just survive, he adapted. He turned the environment, the very jungle, into an ally. Every crystal, every vine, every pulse of the luminar seed became part of his strategy. The Queen realized too late that Arden was no ordinary prey. He was a human, unpredictable, clever, and fearless. With the creatures behind him momentarily delayed, Arden sprinted to a cliffside bridge of floating vines, his legs screaming with exhaustion. Below, the canyon yawned like a mouth ready to swallow him. He leapt, catching the far ledge with precision. The Queen landed behind him, wings folding as she surveyed the gap. Arden paused only briefly, then slid along a narrow ledge toward the inner sanctum, the seed glowing faintly, responding to his presence. Every step was calculated. Every movement counted. Fear still lingered, but Arden's determination was stronger. Humanity had never faced odds like this, but humans survived where others could not because they dared, because they calculated, because they refused to yield. Arden pressed on, the luminar seed safe in his hands, knowing that the moment of confrontation, the peak of the impossible challenge, was passing. The Queen screeched again, frustrated and furious, but Arden didn't look back. He had achieved the impossible, reaching the heart of the Huntresses' territory, manipulating the environment, using ingenuity, courage, and determination to overcome predators far stronger and faster than himself. The final leap forward would bring him to a clearing where the seed could be safely extracted and carried to the colony. And as he ran toward the final stretch, Arden felt something rare in the heart of Virilia. Not fear, not pain, but pure human triumph. The impossible could be faced, and he had faced it. The Queen may still follow, the Huntresses may regroup, but Arden had survived, adapted, and outsmarted them all. One step closer to the seed, one step closer to hope for humanity, Arden Core pushed through the final misty ridge. He knew the real test was not over yet, but he also knew this: humans could endure because courage and intelligence could bend the world itself. Arden's lungs burned and his legs ached as he sprinted along the final ledge. The luminar seed pulsed in his hands, a soft, radiant heartbeat against his palms. Below, the jagged canyon stretched endlessly, ready to swallow any misstep. Behind him, the psychic pressure of the very Queen and her Huntresses pressed like a storm, but Arden's mind was sharper than ever. He had survived the impossible because he relied not on strength, but on intelligence, courage, and determination. Now all that remained was to finish what he had begun. The clearing ahead opened into a plateau where the forest thinned, giving a clear path to a natural extraction point. He knew he had only moments before the Queen recovered from the illusions and the disrupted psychic link. Arden paused briefly, taking in the terrain. Crystals jutted from the ground like teeth, vines swayed dangerously, but he saw what the Queen could not: patterns in the environment. Every hazard could be a weapon if used correctly. He placed the luminar seed carefully on a glowing moss patch, activating a small energy field he had improvised to protect it from falling debris and psychic interference. Then he looked back at the advancing Queen. Her wings glimmered as she hovered, eyes molten silver narrowing in frustration. Arden clenched his jaw. She was magnificent, terrifying, and relentless, but she had never faced a human who would not surrender, who would not yield to fear. The Huntresses lunged first, claws aimed at him. Arden dodged, using the energy field and reflective crystal shards to scatter light and momentarily blind them. He rolled, caught a hanging vine, and swung over a low ridge, dropping down behind them. One stumbled, caught in the debris he had triggered, and another hesitated, confused by the illusions he still maintained with the resonance emitter. Arden felt a surge of relief but did not stop. Survival demanded constant movement. The Queen advanced alone, silent except for the faint hum of psychic energy around her. Arden studied her approach, noticing a subtle rhythm in her wing beats. He timed his movement perfectly, vaulting onto a crystal outcrop above her path. As he landed, he triggered a small charge he had set earlier. Crystals erupted in a controlled collapse, forcing the Queen to adjust midair, her momentum disrupted. Arden did not hesitate. He sprinted to the edge of the plateau where the extraction point awaited, a natural lift of vines and vines interlaced with crystal scaffolding. The luminar seed glowed brighter, responding to Arden's presence as if recognizing his courage. Carefully he placed it in the cradle of the vines. He activated the mechanism, sending it upward, swinging towards safety. But the Queen's screech filled the air as she recovered, her psychic scream shaking the plateau. Arden had only one chance. He glanced around. Crystals jutted from the cliff like spikes, vines formed natural snares, and the terrain itself could be used as a shield. Arden ran straight toward the Queen, baiting her. At the last moment, he dove to the side, letting her momentum carry her into a pre-rigged trap of vines and fallen crystals. She screeched, paused, frustrated, but Arden was already climbing the ridge to safety. The luminar seed was ascending, pulsing with soft light, and he could finally exhale. When he reached the plateau's far edge, Arden collapsed, chest heaving, sweat and grime coating him. He looked back at the forest below. The Queen hovered a moment, silent, seemingly acknowledging him. Humans were unpredictable, she seemed to sense. They adapted, they improvised, they endured. Arden's courage had not only saved his life but had outwitted the deadliest predator on Virilia. The extraction team arrived shortly after, landing on the edge of the plateau. They took the luminar seed and secured it in its containment field. Arden stood, exhausted but unbowed. Engineers and scientists surrounded him, awe in their eyes. "You did it," one whispered, voice shaking. "No one thought a human could survive this." Arden shook his head. "We survive because we don't stop. Because we refuse to give up." Even as he spoke, Arden felt the weight of what he had done. Humanity had claimed hope from the jaws of death, a foothold in a world that was meant to destroy them. The luminar seed could terraform dying colonies, provide life where none existed. His courage, his intelligence, his refusal to surrender, had changed the future. The Queen watched from the mist below, silent now. She would remember Arden, the first human to challenge her rules, to survive where no prey had ever returned. She was not defeated, Virilia was relentless. But Arden had demonstrated that humans were different. They did not yield. They adapted. They persisted. Back at the human colony, Arden helped plant the luminar seed. Its radiant light spread across the barren ground, pulsing like a heartbeat. The air shimmered, energy weaving through the soil, promising growth, survival, and hope. Children watched, engineers smiled, and scientists whispered in disbelief. Arden stood a moment, hands on his knees, heart swelling with relief and pride. He had been alone against impossible odds, against creatures faster, stronger, and more intelligent than any human had faced. Yet he had survived. He had outsmarted predators, turned the environment to his advantage, and delivered hope to his people. Humans were fragile, yes, but Arden's courage had proven that determination, intelligence, and heart could overcome anything, even the impossible. And somewhere deep in the violet mist of Virilia, the queen paused. She seemed to recognize the truth Arden embodied. Humans were not prey. They were a force of ingenuity, courage, and persistence. Arden had shattered the rules of her world, and the legend of his courage would echo through human colonies for generations. Alone, yes, but never powerless. Arden Core had proven that humans could endure, adapt, and triumph no matter the odds. And as he watched the luminar seed pulse with light, he knew that one human's courage had changed everything. The forest below whispered, the mist swirled, and somewhere the Huntresses waited. Arden didn't flinch. Humans faced impossible odds every day. And they survived.